Hi, Heart. So maybe I don't want to teach you anything today. Teaching feels too small. Maybe I just want to sit with you and open a space where something in you says, I didn't know we were allowed to feel this deeply about how we receive. Because receiving is not a skill, not a mindset, not strategy, not manifestation. Receiving is how safely your body lets life land, love land, money land, care land, truth land, someone's presence land. Not just touch the surface of you, but land where it can stay. And that is sometimes terrifying because when something lands, you cannot pretend anymore. You cannot keep performing, I'm fine. You cannot keep creating your truth. You must start being seen, not for what you give, but for what you are. And that is where many of us say we want love, we want money, we want presents, but our body whispers, yes, but where would I hold it? That's why so many of us give beautifully, but receive brokenly, because giving is movement, but receiving requires stillness. And stillness is where truth catches you. Sometimes there is nothing wrong with me, and yet my nervous system does not believe it is safe to be loved without performing for it, or paid for existing, not delivering, not producing, not fixing, not teaching, just being seen. And maybe we didn't fear abandonment. Maybe we feared being fully received. Because what if I let it land and it didn't stay? And that silence in love, I've known it when nothing is wrong, but something is missing. Not love itself, but the visible language of it. Love that lives quietly. Love that doesn't text but never leaves. Love that doesn't promise but doesn't rush away either. Love as sanctuary, not spectacle. And then one day you realize he always loved you. You just didn't speak his frequency. And money, it does the exact same thing. It doesn't always speak your language, but it never abandons resonance. Money always Money doesn't always show up loudly. It shows up when your presence is ready to hold it, not just touch it. And this isn't manifestation, this is maturation. Wanting isn't the same as readiness. Readiness isn't the same as capacity. And capacity isn't the same as feeling worthy. Capacity is simply this: my body can remain open while love and money arrive. That's what my work is. I don't sell programs. I don't heal. I don't coach anymore. I build destinations for consciousness travelers. So, this will be the topics of today's video. And now we will dive deeper into all of this. So, if it sounds interesting, stay. When receiving starts to tremble, most of us don't suffer because love, money, presents, or opportunity never show up. We suffer because when life finally approaches us with something undeniably genuine, something that carries weight, meaning, possibility, or intimacy, Our body quietly trembles, not in excitement, but in question. The question is not, do I want this? The question is, can I hold this? Because receiving is not the moment we get something. Receiving is the moment something is allowed to land, to take up residence in our experience, to be seen, known, and integrated without us needing to escape, fix, perform, reshape, or outrun it. Receiving is not the opening of our hands, it is the slow opening of the body that says, I will not run from myself now, even if what I receive changes something in me. If you have ever longed for love, deeply, quietly, in places others could not see, you might already know. The moment that love truly turns toward you, not in fantasy, projection, or imagination, but truthfully with presence, that moment can feel unbearably exposed. Not because you don't want love, but because love has the unusual power to show you how much of yourself you have never let be loved. That is why receiving can feel more confronting than giving. Giving keeps us moving. Receiving asks us to stay. To receive fully is to reveal ourselves to ourselves, without costume, without rhythm, without curated lighting. It is to feel ourselves witnessed, not just appreciated, but recognized. And resonance, unlike praise or attention, contains truth. Praise can be aimed at the mask. Resonance enters the ribs. Receiving is in many ways an act of quiet courage, because receiving says, I will not perform for this. I will not shrink myself to deserve it. I will not question why it came. I will simply let it stay. Not because I have earned it, but because I am now mature enough to hold it. There is a difference between wanting something and being available for it. Wanting is often mental, sometimes even emotional, but availability is somatic. It is architecture. This is where most people experience an internal tear, one that has nothing to do with being unworthy and everything to do with being unprepared to hold truth without abandoning oneself. Self abandonment, I have come to understand, does not start when we feel lost. It starts when something deeply true appears, and we are not ready to stay present to it. That is when we run, often internally, not physically. That is when we start to scramble into explaining, rationalizing, joking, pretending, smiling, hiding, performing. Strangely, this dismantling of presence doesn't always happen when something painful arrives. No, it most often happens in the presence of something we wanted. Love arrives, money lands, someone sees our essence. Suddenly we laugh it off, or shrink it, or dismiss it. It's not a big deal. Not because we don't want it, but because Longing is often easier than belonging. Longing keeps the experience in our head, in the realm of fantasy and imagined readiness. Belonging, receiving, lending asks us to change posture, to stop reaching outward and instead expand inward. That expansion is vulnerable, delicate, intimate, and deeply misunderstood as resistance. Many call it resistance. But what if it is simply unreadiness to remain present in the moment of fulfillment? That is the moment receiving begins, not the moment it arrives, but the moment you stay. So, now we will continue with the mistranslation of love and the sanctuary of silent love languages. So receiving doesn't always break because something painful enters our space. More often, it trembles when something real enters, something that carries no decoration, no distortion, no proof, just quiet presence. Something that looks and feels like love, not as an idea, not as a promise, but as an atmosphere. And our nervous system, accustomed to chasing evidence, suddenly doesn't know what to do when something genuine simply stays. There is a quiet tension between the love we imagine and the love that truly lands. Imagined love is fluent in our language. It says exactly what we wish to hear. It speaks in words we recognize. It echoes our internal narratives of recognition and reassurance. It feels familiar, not because it is true, but because it is translated into what we already understand. But true love does not always bother to translate itself. It simply arrives, whole, intact, sometimes wordless, often strangely calm, and because it does not perform, we sometimes dismiss it as not enough. The truth is, when love truly belongs to us, it often stops performing. It no longer rushes to be seen, no longer begs to be validated through noise, symbols, or rituals. It leans gently against the doorway of our awareness, breathing, still, not in a hurry, not trying to convince. It becomes less theatrical, more inhabited, sometimes less passionate, more consistent, less fireworks, more fire. Some people experience this and call it boring. Others call it home, like I do. And the same is true of money. Perhaps it is not absent from your life. Perhaps it is simply not arriving in the language you were taught to look for. Perhaps it is already circling you close, loyal, unextorted, simply refusing to perform for the version of you who still believes that worth must be proven. Perhaps it has already stopped playing the role of reward and now quietly waits to become companion. We don't suffer because love or money are absent. We suffer because they have switched languages from performance to presence. And we haven't learned to listen there yet. There is a particular ache that comes from being deeply loved, but not recognizing the language of it. From being seen clearly, but mistaking it for indifference because it lacked fireworks. From being valued, but not spectacularly. From experiencing loyalty, but mistaking it for silence. At some point, we must ask not, is love here? But rather, do I understand the language in which love is currently speaking? And this quiet reorientation is often the beginning of true emotional maturity. Because emotional maturity is not the ability to feel deeply. It is the ability to receive truthfully, to allow love, care, presence, even wealth to arrive without demanding that it perform our favorite language first. Children demand performance, but souls recognize presence. It took me years to understand that what I once thought was absence was often love's most faithful form. There were gestures, quiet consistencies, acts of devotion, even silence filled with loyalty that held more truth than 1,000 passionate messages. But I was listening through a younger translator, one that only recognized love when it mirrored longing, drama, urgency, or proof. I called the others less expressive, but what I meant was they did not translate their love into the language my insecurity needed. And so I had to ask myself, what if I stopped trying to measure love and instead let it speak its mother tongue? That question changed more than my relationship. It changed how I received truth. It changed how I received money. It changed how I received myself because I began to realize receiving is not a skill. It is translation. It is the moment I decide to become willing to hear what I have always been offered in the language it was truly given. Next, we transition gently from love languages to emotional architecture, and from there, then to the archetypes. So, now we continue deeper from the time of love as translation into emotional architecture. Emotional architecture and what I like to call advanced self-love, where receiving feels risky and why self-stay is the core of it all. Because we can call advanced self-love self-stay. I will explain. So there are not only love languages. That was merely the first doorway. Behind the languages, there are emotional architectures. These are inner structures made not of belief or mindset, but of lived emotional memory, history inside the body, contouring what feels possible, what feels safe, what feels overwhelming, and what becomes silent. An emotional architecture is not a story you tell yourself. It is a shape you live in, even when no one is watching. It shapes not your thoughts, but your relationship to presence. Some people can receive affection easily, but collapse when they receive admiration. Some can receive admiration, but break when they receive loyalty. Some can receive loyalty, but disconnect when they receive attention. Some can receive money, but not generosity. Some can receive opportunity, but not tenderness. Some can hold what they worked hard for, but not what simply arrives undeserved, unearned, yet completely resonant. That is the architecture speaking, not the story, not the affirmation, not the belief, the architecture. It whispers to the body. What came gently cannot be trusted. What arrives without effort might leave without warning. What sees me may judge me. What finds me may ask me to stop performing. This is why some of us keep our lives full of movement, even when we crave stillness. Stillness reveals where performance ends and presence begins, and that moment for many is unbearably intimate. And that's why giving feels safer because you are in motion. Receiving, on the other hand, requires stillness. And in stillness, you become visible to yourself. This is why receiving is not a passive act. It is an advanced emotional skill. Or perhaps we can call it a devotional posture. A kind of inner maturity that does not ask, do I deserve this? But rather, do I allow this to stay without shrinking myself? And here we meet advanced self love. Not self love as in warm baths, affirmations, I choose me, glowing rituals, not gentle reassurance, not inner child soothing, even though those belong to earlier chapters of healing. Advanced self love is different. It is quiet, dignified, sometimes uncomfortable. It does not ask us to adore ourselves, but to remain with ourselves. Advanced self love is not a feeling, it is an agreement. I will not abandon myself even when I do not feel like the version of me I would prefer to love. I will repeat it. Advanced self love is an agreement. I will not abandon myself, even when I do not feel like the version of me I would prefer to love. It is not, I love myself most when I feel radiant, creative, magnetic, abundant, certain, but rather, I will stay with myself even when my radiance feels dim, when my creativity feels dry, when my body aches and my vision shakes, when I doubt, when I fear, when I question, and when nothing looks like a breakthrough. Most people expect to feel love in those moments. Advanced self love does not promise feeling, it promises presence. It says, I will stay in the discomfort, in the not knowing, in the space before clarity, in the silence before confirmation. And I will not run to fix, perform, escape, or explain. This is what makes receiving possible. Not knowing how to attract, but knowing how to stay present when what you've attracted finally arrives. Because in that moment, the body searches for all the familiar ways it abandons itself. It performs to not lose it. It shrinks to not be too much. It pretends to not be truly seen. It runs to not be truly held. Advanced self-love is the moment we do not take any of those exits. We remain unimpressive, unavailable for performance, available just for truth. And truth, like love, like money, like connection, does not always arrive loudly. But it always notices when someone is finally present enough to receive it. Sometimes it has been waiting for that moment for years. So, this is where my money and love archetypes begin to take shape, not as branding, not as framework, but as emotional postures. Distinct ways that our architecture organizes how we give, receive, stay, protect, withhold, magnetize, love, and love quietly. So next I will begin opening these archetypal structures. When we begin to listen closely, not with your mind, but with your emotional body, you notice something curious. Not all hearts receive love in the same way. Not all bodies recognize safety through softness. Not all souls trust silence. Not all consciousnesses receive money with gratitude. Some receive it with guilt, some with vigilance, some with a secret fear of being seen too clearly. You begin to see that receiving is not binary, it's architectural. Some hearts can stand under the waterfall of attention, but collapse at the drop of tenderness. Others melt in tenderness, but harden under responsibility. Some open in intimacy, but close when admiration enters. Some can hold the warmth of loyalty, but not the temperature of desire. Some can take in money when it comes with effort, but resist it when it arrives gently, generously, undeservedly. Because in their architecture, ease feels more dangerous than effort. Not because ease is bad, but because effort is familiar, and familiarity often feels safer than truth. And so we begin to notice that what we call personality is often just architecture. What we call my type is often just my safety structure. What we call alignment is sometimes merely endurance. What we call resistance is sometimes simply architecture not yet met with presence. And slowly, softly, almost shyly, the archetypes begin to appear. They are not roles, not profiles, not branding categories, but emotional environments where consciousness temporarily lives. They reveal how we give, how we protect, how we withdraw, how we magnetize, and most of all, how we hold presence without abandoning ourselves. Let me start with the quietest one, the one almost no one sees because it rarely performs. The keeper of presence. This is the architecture that does not shout, does not chase, does not panic. It does not seduce. It does not sell. It does not dramatize. It just remains. The keeper does not love through volume, but through continuity. It does not prove love. It remains where love would be found again. Sometimes it is mistaken for coldness or detachment or withholding, especially by those who expect love to sparkle, to be considered valid. But the keeper does not sparkle, it warms. It says, I will not dramatize my love, I will hold it, so it does not slip away. This is the architecture of sanctuary, depth, and emotional gravity. It does not attract by demand, but by atmosphere. The keeper's shadow I call the withholder. Because sanctuaries can become caves, and warmth, when overly protected, can disappear into invisibility. When pain enters, the keeper sometimes transforms into the withholder, still present but unavailable, still loving but unreachable, still loyal but silent. Safety becomes isolation. Protection becomes disappearance. And in that moment, love is no longer withheld out of strength, but out of fear. If you meet me too deeply, you might see where I hurt. And I do not know if I can stay with that part of me yet. This is what he is saying. This is not cruelty, it is unfinished architecture. And then the opposite arrives, the inspirer of spark and breath. Where the keeper is emotional gravity, the inspirer is emotional oxygen. The inspirer does not hold love like a flame, it fans it. It brings movement, color, voice, emotional shimmer, laughter, expression, aliveness, invitation. It does not say stay, it says come alive here. It is not about proof, it is the architecture of invitation. It whispers to life, meet me in color. And the inspirer shadow is the performer. Because when inspiration loses its root, expression becomes performance. Connection becomes chase. Spark becomes spectacle. Presence becomes persuasion. And it's instead of saying love can expand here, the performer quietly asks, will you stay if I keep dazzling you? The truth, the performer doesn't chase love. It chases assurance, not to receive, but to make receiving feel safer. But real receiving is never earned through performance. It begins in presence. And then we meet the power archetype, not power as domination, but power as holding. the commander of integrity and structure. The commander is not here to entertain, not to hide, not to dramatize. It is here to hold, to guide, to protect, to direct love with responsibility. Where the inspirer says, "Come alive," and the keeper whispers, "Stay here," the commander speaks with a quieter language. "You are safe to become in my presence." This is not romantic love. This is love as structure, love as reliability, love as guidance. In money, this is not chasing abundance. This is creating a space where abundance feels safe to remain. People feel the commander not because it performs, but because it does not collapse when love arrives. This architecture does not ask, "Do you choose me?" It asks, "Can you trust me to hold what arrives?" And that is different. The commander's shadow is the forcer. When structure becomes fear-driven, the commander tightens. Guidance turns to control. Presence turns to pressure. Leadership turns to insistence. Not out of arrogance, but out of fear that if life is not held firmly, it will disappear. And so the forcer sees receiving as responsibility, not companionship. Love becomes something to manage. Money becomes something to contain. They are no longer welcomed, they are supervised. But receiving is not supervision, it is companionship. There are more archetypes, yes, but these are the fundamental holding patterns. Some of us are keepers, some are inspirers, some are commanders. All are capable of receiving, but not all feel safe to do so. The goal is not to fix any of these, not to balance them, not to decide which one is better. Architectures don't need fixing, they need witnessing. Receiving is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming someone who can stay with who you already are without abandoning yourself when truth arrives. Truth in a form of love or money, because they are both coming from the same stream. And that is where receiving truly begins. So, where love and money speak the same language, at some point in this inner inquiry, you begin to notice something astonishing. The very moment your body trembles when love arrives is often the exact same moment it trembles when money does. Not because love and money are the same thing, but because they activate the same place in the emotional architecture. That place I call landing. Landing is not when something enters your life. Landing is when that something is allowed to stay without you shrinking, performing, apologizing, retreating, over explaining, or rationalizing it away. We do not struggle to attract, we struggle to allow. We struggle to let it rest in us. Most people have felt the difference when someone loves you. But you immediately say, are you sure? Why? What do you see in me? Or when money arrives, but instead of receiving, you say, this is too much, this is too early, this is too intimate. Not intimate in a sexual sense. Intimate because being paid, being valued without performance reveals how deeply you are actually seen. Sometimes scarcity is not the fear of having less, but the fear of being seen as valuable. And so we return to one of the deepest truths hidden beneath manifestation, beneath self-worth talk, beneath healing, beneath coaching and all frameworks. Love and money do not test your readiness to receive. They test your willingness to remain. Remain as you are, without adjusting, forcing your confidence, shrinking your essence, or endless affirmations loud enough to drown out the quiet question: do I feel worthy enough to simply be held right now? So some people can hold love but not generosity. Some can hold admiration but not loyalty. Some can hold money but not care. Some can hold attention but not devotion. Some can hold support but not tenderness. Tenderness is often the most intimidating form of love because it carries no mask. And easy money is often the most intimate form of abundance because it carries no justification. Entire industries exist to help people attract love and money, but very few dare to explore how to feel safe when it finally arrives. Because receiving is not an external act, it is an internal reorganization. It is when your emotional architecture asks, will I now expand or will I exile the part of me that still feels too raw to be seen? And that is the true threshold. And the place where architecture meets receiving. The keeper, when love arrives, does not chase it, it holds it gently. But if unhealed, the keeper withholds. It becomes sanctuary without access. The inspirer, when money flows, does not force it, it magnetizes it through resonance. But if unrooted, the inspirer performs, turning resonance into entertainment. The commander, when truth arrives, does not panic, it steadies the space. But if fearfully attached, the commander forces, he is turning structure into supervision. And the architectures do not only interact with love or money, they interact with receiving itself. Because receiving is not passive, receiving is relational with yourself. True receiving doesn't ask, how much is this worth? But am I a place where this is safe to belong? And this, without trying, without planning, is where your work begins to emerge. So, yes, that's just a different kind of work, but we can still call it work. So I think it's been a lot for one video, and I have definitely not talked about everything what came through Today, there are also other love and money archetypes I would like to introduce to you. But I didn't share this to impress you or even to explain. I shared it to give you a glimpse, not into concepts, but into the kind of inner architecture my work is built on. If any part of you felt seen here, not because I described you, but because something in you recognized itself, then perhaps this is not just language for you. Perhaps it is a landscape. This is where my work lives. This is where our work can live. Not in strategies, not in fixing, not in emotional performance, but in spaces where truth can finally land without being rushed, corrected, decorated, or packaged. I am building these spaces. I call them custom consciousness destinations because they are not programs. They are places of return, unique, energetic environments created for those who already sense truth but want to experience what happens when they stop translating it and finally start inhabiting it. Some of these spaces already exist, they are prepared, quietly waiting for those who recognize the architecture. And some will come to life when the right person arrives who calls them into form. These are bespoke consciousness destinations. I also keep a small number of one-to-one private containers and soul companionship portals for those who don't need guidance but want to stand in the presence of their own clarity and not abandon themselves when it finally speaks. I don't rush these, I don't mass produce them, I don't offer them loudly. I listen for them the same way you might be listening now. You'll find all of these in the description of this video, and if we are meant to meet there, we will.